I want to say, are there any members of the foundation board here? Anyone? Yay! Thanks, John. We want to thank you all for providing breakfast for us and for supporting this large gathering of people as we learn and grow together. So thank you, thank you. So see, maybe you don't have to get to lunch as quickly because you've got some breakfast. My name is Cheryl Bishop, and I'm one of the associate pastors here, and this is not children's time. I don't know if y'all realize this. It's been 2 years since I was in family ministry. 2 years, yeah, right? And I get to do children's time in modern today because of schedules and everything, and I'm like, it's the first time in 2 years I've done children's time in there. But people always say, I just love your children's time. And I'm like, well, you have a good memory, because that was a long time ago. But now I get to serve with faith formation and in pastoral care. And so what I adore about both of those, but specifically pastoral care, working with caring ministry, is that I have moments when I care for the entire breadth of our congregation. On Thursday, prayed with a family with a baby in NICU, and also went to the bedside of somebody on hospice. Like, it's just one of those moments in my call to ministry when I am serving the entire span of who we are. And I just adore it. My primary function in faith formation is working with women's ministry and in parenting and marriage support. So that's where I get to spend most of my time. And then, special projects when Scott says, hey, Cheryl, I'm thinking about this. And we're like, yes. So Scott and I work side by side in faith formation and in caring ministry. And so that's a great partnership that we have. Let's start with a word of prayer. Holy God, we come to you this day as the sun rises to remember that you claim us, that every new day is filled with your mercies. May we receive them, and then may we share them. Because, oh God, this world needs us. It needs us to be a witness of your love and your grace and all of that comes from our risen Savior, Jesus Christ. So be with us in this time of learning together, that we may hear your word for us today, that we may understand the tradition and history of who we are as United Methodists and go from this place with new steps to take, new actions to make. We give you thanks for your love, for the generosity of those around us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, big Sunday school, I want to review how many of you were, if you're comfortable sharing? You always have the right to pass, so you don't have to share. But how many of you were here last week? Okay, and how many of you were not here last week? Okay, so just enough that it's important for us to kind of recap what we're talking about. So we have the social principles of the United Methodist Church, and these are included in our book of discipline. Oh, sorry, my homework sticky notes on here. I'm taking a class on polity right now. This is a gripping read. Just saying. It's important, but got to work through it. But the book of discipline is what guides us in our ministry towards our mission. It talks about our structure and our organization, but also the inspiration and God's guidance into how we live that out. And so our social principles are included in this because we as a United Methodist Church have a long history of social justice, of not only knowing what our faith is, but how do we live that out in order for us to expand God's kingdom. So this involves some controversial issues, but we tackle them from a Christian perspective. So the social principles express a commitment to translate our faith into action in the world. These principles, rooted in Wesleyan tradition, serve as a guide for ethical aspirations in public policy and personal commitment, reflecting a desire to love God and neighbors as themselves. So our social principles were first approved at the General Conference of 1972. So we became the United Methodist Church when the Methodist Church and the United Brethren combined into the United Methodist Church in 1968. At that General Conference, this is really cool. I didn't know this till this year. My dad was ordained in the first class in 1968 as United Methodist elder. Isn't that cool? I was like, Dad, how come you've never told me that? And he was like, I don't know. I was like, okay. Okay. But so our social principles were first approved in 1972 in Atlanta. And they've been part of our book of discipline and our governing documents since then. They get revised every 4 years at General Conference. And General Conference is our highest legislative body that can revise those. So in our connectional structure, there's a statement in the book of discipline that doesn't call us a connectional system. It doesn't call us a connectional body. It calls us a connectional people. And it was the first time that I've read that and gone, oh, yeah, that is who we are. But this is the structure. So at our highest level, we have General Conference that meets every 4 years unless there's a global pandemic. Then underneath that, we have our Council of Bishops, which all of our bishops provide leadership and guidance to the church. We also have the Judicial Council, which interprets the church law and resolves disputes. Also, they provide clarity on what is written in the Book of Discipline when people have questions about what does that really mean? Then we have our annual conferences, which are geographic regions where local churches and clergy are organized. So that's what we host here. We just hosted in June is our annual conference. So that goes all the way up to Dalhart, all the way down to San Angelo. It has Midland, but not Odessa. So weird. And then down to Waco and Georgetown and Ramrock and then up to us. So that's a huge geographical span. And there are numbers of those all across the nation and then our international conferences. And then we have subdivisions of our conferences in districts. We are in the Metro East District. We have a district superintendent who works closely with the bishop to help guide us. And then local churches are a part of that. Those are the individual congregations that make up that church. So we are led also by general agencies of the United Methodist Church. And those include, look at that, Archives and History, Church and Society, Communications, Disciple Ministry. There's a whole bunch of them. The one that we are focusing on today is Church and Society, because that is who helps us to implement and discern how the social principles impact us as a denomination and also as a local congregation. So the social principles that were implemented from 2025 to 2028 were adopted in Charlotte. And there are 6 writing teams across the globe that help nuance every word that's written in them. It is intentional. It is not just oh, let's make that real flowery. Like, it is intentional, every word that's included. And so that's when they were first put in 1972. They're revised every 4 years. And so this is the most current iteration of them. So in the preface, it reminds us that it is not church law, it's a living document. It's meant to be revised when needed. And the purpose of revision is to increase their theological grounding, to reflect a worldwide nature of the church in all areas of the document and to ensure it is written concisely and clearly. What I appreciate about social principles is that they are to be implemented worldwide. We are a global denomination. We do extend beyond the United States. And so if it's not the gospel everywhere, it's not the gospel here. So we need to make sure that what is within our social principles applies across the world in all kinds of different communities and structures. It reminds us that we are one body with many parts, that we are diverse, and that every part is valuable. And our high calling to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with our God in Micah 6:8 reminds us of how we are to function as individuals and as a corporate body. And so our general rules help us do that. When I was a camp director at Bridgeport, we would remember our 3 rules like this. Do y'all know the 3 rules? The first is do no harm. The second is do all the good you can. And the third is we often say stay in love with God, but if it's in the real formal language, it's attend to the ordinances of God. That includes worship and study and action. So here's how we did it at church camp. Y'all are gonna do it with me. You ready? Stay. No, wait, hold on. Do no harm. Children, remember that. You will too. Do no harm. The next one was do all the good you can. The third one is stay in love with God. Easy, easy. The challenge for us is that's not always easy. That's not always easy. And it is not just how do we do this as a whole group of people, but how do I live this out every day in my daily life? How do I make sure that I am not contributing to harm? How do I make sure that I am contributing to good? And how do I stay in the presence of God through worship, study, devotion, small group, neighbors, gathering, eating well, sleeping? Like there's a lot. So as we divide into the section of the social principles that we're dealing with today, they're divided into 4 categories. So the first one is the community of all creation, which is what Scott led last week. Today, we're going to focus on the economic community. They gave me the fun one. Economic community. The third is social community, and the fourth is political community, but we're going to flip those. And next week, the topic will be the political community. And Reverend Keith Head, who is here, he's a retired elder in the United Methodist Church. And you ready for this? Keith was an associate pastor when I was in high school and college at my home church. Just love it. We are connectional people. And so Keith will be here next week talking about the political community. And then the week after that will be Sarah Marcellus Luganville talking about social community. So in the economic community, that section in our social principles consists of 3 different sections. First, we have the preface, which lays out why this is important in our Wesleyan tradition. It's the introduction and the overview. Then there's a section on the economic challenges, which address globalization, poverty and income inequality, human trafficking and slavery and corruption. And then the third section is economic justice. It outlines our commitment and call for responsible consumerism, farming and agricultural production, the dignity of work, Sabbath and renewal time, and corporate responsibility. So we have an introduction, and then we have here are the challenges, and here are the ways we're going to work to rectify those challenges. knowing that those are real and authentic and in place, how are we going to better address them as the United Methodist Church? So our foundation in that comes from Matthew 25, verses 34 through 40. I can't read that on my screen, so I'm going to move over here and read with you all. Truly, I tell you, that's what this section is often called, is the sheep and the goats. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you, a stranger, and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me. So as we look at our social principles, when we looked at creation last week, and when we look at political and social justice in the weeks to come, and when we talk about the economic community today, we will see that they are all interconnected, because this is foundational for us. Caring for those, sharing with them, providing for them as if and because they are Christ's body. So as United Methodists, we profess that all we are and all that we possess belong to God. We are temporary stewards of the resources and material goods that we have accumulated. In our financial dealings and relationships, no less than other aspects of discipleship, we are compelled to serve God and neighbor in all we do. Accordingly, we pledge ourselves to the establishment of just, equitable, and sustainable economies that work for all. That is in our preface, that work for all. So these are the things that I mentioned earlier that we'll talk about in our challenges in our economic justice. As Methodists, with John Wesley in the 1700s, he was already speaking against slavery. And so that's why it is an important part of our history as a denomination, but also to understand that so many of the systems that we are a part of have segregated people financially and economically, related to food security, related to dignity of work. So all of this is interconnected. And so we'll look at globalization and poverty and income inequality, human trafficking and slavery and graft, bribery and corruption. You know what graft is? Who can define graft? I can't either. Like it's fraud and corruption related to financial resources. All right, so when we look at globalization, we believe that global cooperation often contributes to human and environmental flourishing. However, we lament that globalization has created significant obstacles to achieving economic justice in too many instances. Globalization is marked by the growing integration of national economies and the emergence of multinational corporations that play an outsized role in global marketing systems. So in response to that, as a church, we recognize the importance of creating just, equitable, and sustainable economies that benefit all members of society. and sustainable economies that benefit all members of society, especially marginalized and vulnerable people. Further, because globalization transcends the capacity of any single individual, community, or government to manage, we call on international bodies, including the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, and others, to hold multinational corporations and national governments accountable to provide for economies that promote people over profit and protect the environment. So as you kind of digest all those big words, I want you to turn to a neighbor and talk about what does that really mean? What does that really mean? Ready, set, go. All right, anybody say anything wise and wonderful that you think we should share with the group? Let me hear it. Whisper it to a neighbor and they'll say it for you.
I just said the same thing you did. Which is that if we're Christians, we want the important organizations in our world that, like the United Nations and the World Bank and many others that determine the way we run the world, to put people before profit, to ensure that there is justice and opportunity for everyone in the world, economic and all kinds of justice, to protect God's earth, not destroy it with pollution, and to protect our climate for the future of the world.
Yep. Yes. Yep. And see how that's integrated with the creation? It's also integrated with social. It's also integrated with political. Like all of these things have a thread that runs between all of them, right? And so then when we look at poverty and income inequality, here's what it says. We decry the widening gap between the rich and the poor and the concentration of wealth in the hands of ever smaller percentages of the global population. We lament that too many of the world's people lack the basic resources necessary for survival and pledge ourselves to work towards the eradication of the roots and effects of poverty. We further lament the multiple causes of poverty, such as war, famine, diseases, and desertification. Sorry, I should put these on. Yeah, so much better. So much better. And so here's how we respond to that. We commit ourselves to be an active ministry with impoverished communities by sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and by supporting their efforts to secure equal opportunities and meet human needs, including food, water, healthcare, and education. We reject preferential treatment in the church on the basis of wealth and income. We also commit to work toward eradicating unjust practices, policies, and systems that have condemned entire generations to live in unrelenting poverty. We fight against the systems which have perpetuated generational poverty for decades or hundreds of years. That's what we are called to, and that's what we commit ourselves to. So that includes gerrymandering. That includes laws that other people, segregation. We may have laws against segregation, but it's still happening, right? So how are we helping to ensure that the cycle of poverty is disrupted in a way that leads people towards having enough? Having enough. And in the meantime, how do we continue to provide for the basic needs of those around us and those around the world related to food insecurity and to clean water? So then as we talk about human trafficking and slavery, we condemn human trafficking and slavery as profound violations of the inherent dignity and worth of every person and of their fundamental rights related to autonomy, including the ability of every individual to make personal life choices. We understand slavery to be a repudiation of the basic Christian understanding that all people are created in the image of God. This isn't on the slide, but it says human trafficking entails the buying and selling of human beings for the purposes of forced or indentured labor, including private and commercial sexual exploitation. We consider such trafficking to be abhorrent because it violates basic human rights and exploits the vulnerabilities of the weakest members of society. Those who are especially vulnerable include minor children and women, immigrants, displaced people, and others living in poverty. So we support the abolition of human trafficking and slavery of any kind. We commit ourselves to work towards the elimination of the social and economic inequities that provide fertile ground for the flourishing of these evils. See how it's connected again? We reject the practice of using enslaved, indentured, imprisoned, or coerced laborers in extractive industries or in the production of commercial goods. We urge individuals, families, congregations, and retailers to practice socially responsible consumerism by educating themselves about the sources of labor and the working conditions involved in the production processes. Responsible consumerism. We contribute to the trafficking, slavery, and indentured employment or practice because of what we choose to buy. All right, and then the last one we're going to talk about is graft, bribery, and corruption. We oppose graft, bribery, and corruption and other forms of corruption as breaches of the public trust and impediments to the creation of just and equitable societies. We deplore the involvement of government officials, business executives, church leaders, and other people of authority in these practices, not only because of their illegality, but because such practices erode public confidence in legitimate forms of authority. Additionally, they subvert basic principles related to equity under the law and serve as obstacles to establishing just and equitable economies. The consequence is the diversion of public funding and manipulation of public contracts to undermine projects and services that could benefit the entire society. So much of that is laying out just what's right and how we hold people accountable. Sometimes it feels too big to hold corporations or government officials or even church leaders accountable for their contributions through fraud and immoral financial dealings. So for us, we may make personal decisions about who we support and how we support them, either financially or in voice, but also how we vote, who we elect, and what other organizations we are part of that might have influence over that. Because it might be too big for my little voice, but if I support another organization that has a greater impact because they have the ear of somebody else, either the corrupt one or the ones who can challenge the corrupt one, then we can continue to have our influence through somebody else. So that's why it's important as we look at all of these, we continue to talk about it's individual and it's corporate. It's a little of both. We can all say, yes, bribery is wrong, right? Yep. But how many times do we turn and go, oh, they'll figure it out. That's just the way that is. And we don't have to think about it just from an American perspective. We get caught up so many times in thinking, oh, this is just who I am as an American and this is how the government works and whatever. We need to think about how that happens in local communities, either here with business or with legal issues and across the world. How many times do we hear stories of people who get stopped in a foreign country and they know ahead of time they're going to have to pay a cash fee to the government officials in order to get to cross a border or to travel in that country? So how do we put a stop to it? I don't know the answer. But I know that I want to and long to be part of a system that works towards the answer. So as we look at economic justice, those are all the challenges that we acknowledge that are real, that we can say out loud, these are the problems in our world. And so here's how we then continue to work towards economic justice. Our commitment to achieving economic justice is rooted in the covenantal understanding that God's creation is meant to be shared by all humans and sentient beings. Just as the oikos, or household, served as the heart of the economy in ancient times, our belief in the inclusive nature of God's global household motivates our pursuit of just and equitable and sustainable economies. We therefore urge governments, businesses, and civic organizations to ensure that individuals, families, and communities not only survive, but also thrive. So here's one of the ways we seek economic justice, and that's through responsible consumerism. I like an Amazon dress. I'm wearing an Amazon dress. And it's a challenge when I think, I don't know where it came from. I don't know who was forced to work to make it. And so I have to pay attention to what I'm buying, when I'm buying, how often I'm buying, and who it came from. We live, Suzanne Stabile, who teaches about Enneagram, talks about for I think it's threes, that threes who like to project an image, that threes have a difficult time because DFW is the most vain area. And Dallas County is the worst. Like projecting image is super important. So we gather things. We throw things away because we need the newest thing. We don't fix a thing because that's too hard. We might have to pay somebody else to do it. And the amount of money that I would have to pay to fix it is the amount that I could just buy a new one. And we don't do that just with shoes. We do that with buildings in our city. So responsible consumerism is a call to us to make sure that where we are spending our money and when we are spending our money supports the dignity of all people, cares for the environment. Like all those things, right? Again, there's that thread all the way through. When we look at farming and agricultural production, the majority of United Methodists in the territory of the United Methodist Church are not cities. It is in rural areas and in areas that depend on agriculture. I love that it starts with this. The emphasis placed on the necessity of daily bread in the Lord's Prayer serves as a crucial reminder of the importance of daily sustenance and the crucial roles that farming and other forms of agricultural production play in meeting the nutritional needs of a rapidly expanding global population. We endorse measures that protect the continued operation of local family and communal farms and call for the elimination of government programs that disproportionately benefit the large corporations and agribusinesses. My family still owns our farm. It's up near Petersburg, Texas, if anybody knows where that is. Thank you. Shout out to the Panhandle, the Plains. My grandparents, my great grandparents bought the farm when they moved out to Floydada. And then it has stayed in the family. My grandfather worked it, my uncle worked it. And in this generation, my generation, none of us are there. Because it was too hard to continue to make a living as a farming family. So we lease it to another farmer so that he has more land. And also we put wind turbines on it. Yeah, we were so happy for those wind turbines. And part of that's because that is a sustainable form of electric production, right? That can continue to benefit our society. And then now some of those incentives and pay are being taken away. And so that doesn't work towards the agricultural industry and sustaining that, right? But that's what that land could now be used for. So we have to find ways to support that. So many corporations come in and buy up family farms and take them over and overuse the land. So in paying attention to who is our, Texas agriculture person, Railroad Commission, all of that, those are important offices and elections that we need to pay attention to. We need to pay attention to how our water is being impacted by farming practices. We need to pay attention to how employees on farms are being treated and paid. So our farming and agricultural business knowledge might need to grow. We might need to start paying more attention to that if we aren't already, because it's real easy to go to Kroger and get strawberries and avocados and cantaloupes and asparagus, which do not grow here, right? But we sure take advantage of it when it does. And buying organic is not the solution. for the economic piece. We also need to pay attention to the dignity of work for all people. We believe in the dignity of work not merely as a means of subsistence, but as a way for individuals to contribute to the flourishing of their families and contribute to the common good. This affirmation of the dignity of work leads us to support the right to safe and secure working conditions, free from health and safety hazards. We also endorse the establishment and enforcement of policies that guarantee workers fair and equitable compensation, sometimes referred to as a living wage. Recently, with all the talk about funding for Medicaid, and you hear conversation on both sides, right? And we hear people who say, all the people who receive Medicaid are not just sitting at home on their couch. Many of them are working and yet do not receive a living wage. They do not have the money to provide for appropriate housing, food, and health care. So we need to pay attention to how policies outside of us are impacting the daily lives of people. And then what influence do we have over that? We oppose the widespread reliance on child labor. Can we all agree to that? Yep, that's really easy because we're Americans. We oppose the widespread reliance on child labor. That doesn't happen everywhere across the world where children are protected. Child labor, which forces children under the age of 18 to relinquish their childhoods and forego educational opportunities and instead to work in commercial, agricultural, industrial, manufacturing, or extractive industries. We support workers' freedom of association, including their rights to organize unions, to engage in collective bargaining, and to protest both unsafe working conditions and unjust employment policies and practices. We support measures that limit the length of both the workday and the work week, and endorse policies that guarantee every worker paid time off, including but not limited to sick time and bereavement leave, opportunities to vote and to carry out other civic duties, holiday or vacation time, and parental leave for those caring for newborns or newly adopted children. Those are things that employers in some states, many states, are not required to provide for their employees. And yet, we are called to the work where people not only survive, but they thrive. If you're an employer, a company owner, in upper management, CEO, on a board, whatever, pay attention to the policies and how they are implemented in the work that your organization does that benefit the people over the profits. It's real easy as a do-gooder Christian to be like, yeah, I'm all for that. And then to be like, oh, but that doesn't work here. Right? So it's that struggle and that challenge of figuring out, how do we do that? How do we make sure that we really are a part of the economic justice that supports our workers in order to benefit our communities and the business? And we affirm the importance of taking time away from work to rest and renew the mind, body, and spirit, to engage in play and recreation, and to serve the needs of our communities. We further affirm that Sabbath is also a time to provide rest for others in our human community. We encourage all United Methodists to honor the Sabbath by actively participating in the worship life of a local congregation. We urge governments and businesses to promote policies and practices that allow people of all religious faiths to take ample time away from work to engage in worship, renewal, and fellowship opportunities. Where does the mandate for Sabbath come from? Genesis. I don't think it's an accident that it's in the very first verses of our Bible to remind us all that we need rest. God modeled it for us. God calls us to it. And we continue to find ways to gather in corporate worship. It's not just about taking a nap. It's about taking the opportunity to be reminded that you are a beloved child of God. In worship, whether corporate or individual, in time away from expending your energy and your mind and your body and perhaps your soul into this work of someone else, to be renewed, to connect with creation and to connect with the one who created. Do y'all remember? Well, I'm sure you all do. Blue laws, right? I remember going to the grocery store one time. My mom sent my dad and I with the list, and we couldn't even go down one of the aisles because it had blue tape hanging across it, right? And do you remember what the things were that we couldn't buy on Sundays in the grocery stores? Alcohol, which, I mean, still hard liquor is not available on a Sunday. I'm sorry, what? Hammers and nails so that you couldn't work, beauty products, which I thought was hilarious. I was like, why can't we buy a razor, Dad? I don't know. But all that vanity, right? So when we look at those things, I think, wow, what do we need to pay attention to? It's not a law, it's not a restriction, but what do I need to disconnect from in order to truly experience Sabbath? I grieve for families who have to choose between church and kids' activities. When I very first started teaching, we could never assign homework over the weekend, and we couldn't assign homework on Wednesdays because those were the days people would go to church, right? We couldn't even do review your spelling words on a Wednesday, nothing. And so we've lost that value in society because of our over consumerism, our overproduction, our need to go, 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 go. And so that becomes for us an individual task as well as a corporate one. And then our last is corporate responsibility. We believe that corporations and businesses, like all other human institutions, are charged with doing good, promoting equity and justice, and making positive contributions to communal life. We call on corporations and businesses to place people above profits and to observe the highest ethical standards in conducting their businesses. We hold corporations, businesses, and governments responsible for any violations or infringements of the rights and lands of individuals and communities, and commit ourselves to advocate and work for justice. We commend socially responsible investment as an important mechanism to hold corporations accountable for promoting the common good. That last one, we commend socially responsible investment as an important mechanism to hold corporations accountable for promoting the common good. I'm thankful that my retirement is through WestPath. WestPath is one of the agencies of the United Methodist Church that then invests and lends and cares for things, right? But I don't have to question where my retirement funds are and who they're supporting. And that's hard sometimes When your economic advisor goes, okay, we're going to put some money into this fund, and we're going to put some money in this fund, and we're going to put some money in this fund, and our financial advisor loves it when Rod and I go, but who is that? Who is that? Because where I invest at all levels of my household economy need to reflect the values that I aspire to. And it's a challenge because some of us never even think like, okay, good. I saw the green line go up today, not the red line going down, but we need to pay attention to where we are investing. And so how do United Methodists seek economic justice? So the General Board of Church and Society is dedicated to the work of living faith, seeking justice, and pursuing grace. That board is a general agency at the highest level of our structure, okay? But we also have a local in our congregation, Church and Society. Kathy Chin, are you chair of that right now? Kathy Chin is chair of that right now. And so what I appreciate about them is not only do we get global information about what we need to know, but our own church and society group within our church provides opportunities for us to learn about them. We have had poverty, breaking the cycle of poverty. We've talked about imprisonment. We've talked about lending practices. There are several things that directly impact those in our community that they do a beautiful job of educating on. So if you have the opportunity to ever be part of that, I encourage you to do so. Because you will be surprised at some of the practices in the world around us that directly impact our neighbors, the ones we are called to love. So these are some of our partnerships from the general board. Yeah, that's hard to read, y'all. Sorry about that. The Coalition on Human Needs, the Fair Labor Association, the Interfaith Worker Justice Group, the National Farm Worker Ministry, and the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Those are all partnerships that our general board has. And so these are the things that we are called to in our own lives, not just in that big partnership, but in our own lives. To live with integrity and financial manners. Practice stewardship. Avoid exploitative practices and unethical lending, dishonest business dealings, or excessive consumerism, and support fair trade. Our International Christmas Market always has an amazing amount of items that you can purchase that are fair trade, which means the person who is making them and providing them is appropriately paid for the gifts or the products that they're making. Does it cost more? Yes, but there's a reason for it. Support living wages and workers' rights. Advocate for just compensation, safe working conditions, and collective bargaining rights. Participate in campaigns for minimum wage reform and local economic equality or equity. Tithe and give generously. Tithing is a spiritual discipline that supports not only the local church, but missions, outreach, and community support. Giving generously to organizations that work to eliminate poverty, support affordable housing, and feed the hungry. Care for the least of these through our giving. Engage in ministries with the poor. Support food pantries, homeless shelters, job training programs, and financial literacy ministries. Build relationships with those in economic hardships. Not just offering charity, but walking alongside in justice and compassion. Advocate for systemic change. Support public policies that promote economic equity, such as universal health care, public education, fair housing, and tax fairness. Engage in civic life, voting, contacting legislators, and participating in public forums. And use the General Board of Church and Society to learn and act on economic justice issues. Educate yourselves. Study scripture. Look at Wesleyan theology related to wealth, poverty, and justice. Participate in church-wide discussions or small groups focused on the social principles and current economic issues. And practice simplicity and sustainability. Embrace simpler lifestyles to reduce excess and ensure more equitable sharing of global resources. Support environmental justice as it connects to economic justice, especially for low-income communities disproportionately affected by climate issues. John Wesley, in his sermon on the use of money, said this: "I entreat you in the name of the Lord Jesus, act up to the dignity of your calling. No more sloth. Whatsoever your hand findeth to do, do it with your might. No more waste. Cut out every expense which fashion, caprice, or flesh and blood demand." I'll put that on my refrigerator as a reminder. Like, cut out every expense which fashion, caprice, or flesh and blood demand. No more covetousness, but employ whatever God has entrusted you with in doing good in every possible kind and degree to the household of faith, to all people. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. So our partnerships, I just want to highlight a few that we have direct. I've mentioned Church and Society here at FUMCR. In economic justice, we have partnership with Network of Community Ministries, also with Austin Street Center. But just because that's where we serve doesn't mean that's the only place where you can serve. So look for ways to support those. We have partnership with New Friends, New Life, who supports women, teens, those who have been human trafficked, as a way for them to develop job skills and counseling and wholeness so that they identify their own worth and dignity in a way that helps them to have new life, to be people of resurrection. And UWF, our United Women in Faith, has a strong commitment to serve women, children, and youth around the globe, to help break down those barriers that have prevented them from economic justice. So I want you to think about, what are your questions? How is God speaking to you? How are you going to be a better co-creator and caretaker of the created world? Because it's connected. How can you live specifically, what can you specifically do to live out your faith in caring for others and neighbor when it comes to creation for all and to economic justice? I have a friend who took, I don't remember which financial piece or one of those classes with us. And she was adamant that she was not going to do any of that stuff because she doesn't like to be told what to do. And money was a place where she felt like she could hold on to her own autonomy and care for herself. But as I've watched her live differently over the 20 to 25 years that we've been friends, I've watched that soften in her because of her connection in the church she attends and how she sees it's not her money. It's a resource that God has entrusted to her so that she can bring the kingdom here and now. And so I pray that you will have that kind of experience as well. This week, I want you to keep up with your receipts. We all, like, you remember you used to have to balance a checkbook? Some of you probably still do, right? But it wasn't electronic and you had to do it in your ledger and keep up with it and all of that and categorize it and figure it out. So pay attention to where you individually are spending your money this week. Do you really need it? Does it contribute to the economy or the world or to the trash can? And how does it impact our kingdom? So we have this litany that's included with our social principles and our social creed. And so I would invite you to join with me. It's printed on your handout as well, if that is better for you to read. Let's unite our voices together. God and the Spirit revealed in Jesus Christ calls us by grace to be renewed in the image of our Creator, that we may be one in divine love for the world. Today is the day. God cares for the integrity of creation, wills the healing and wholeness of all life, weeps at the plunder of earth's goodness, and so shall we. Today is the day. God embraces all hues of humanity, delights in diversity and difference, favors solidarity, transforming strangers into friends. And so shall we. Today is the day. God cries with the masses of starving people, despises growing disparity between rich and poor, demands justice for workers in the marketplace. And so shall we. Today is the day God deplores violence in our homes and streets, rebukes the world's roaring madness, humbles the powerful and lifts up the lowly. And so shall we. Today is the day God calls for nations and peoples to live in peace, celebrates where justice and mercy embrace, exults when the wolf grazes with the lamb. And so shall we. Today is the day God brings good news to the poor, proclaims release to the captives, gives sight to the blind, and sets the oppressed free. And so shall we. May it be so. Go in grace and peace. Pay attention to your money this week. See what you learn about yourself. Thanks, guys. See y'all later.